Hey, welcome everyone to Plant Profits. I'm Vern Davis. I am your host of Plant Profits, which is proudly brought to you by Produce Global. My guest today started her career in customer experience and digital strategy at the age of 18, so a couple years ago, delivering award-winning campaigns for big brands such as Starbucks, Electronic Arts, EA as we all know it, Nike. She's since pivoted to cannabis retail and has worked with some of the most influential cannabis retailers in the industry. I want you all to welcome Ann Forkutza, who is head of strategic partners and industry relations with Dutchie. Ann, how are you?
I'm doing great, Vern. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Oh, had to do it. I was forced, had to do it.
You were forced to. That's not nice.
No, you created the energy. I had to bring you in. This is great.
All right, all right. Good recovery. Good
Yeah,
recovery.
I try. I try. Hey, so this Dutchie thing, that Dutchie's first impact in the industry was in Canada, correct?
No, we actually based originally based in Bend, Oregon,
Yeah.
and then we are in Canada as well. So we currently we currently support over 6,000 dispensaries all across North America. So both US and
And
Canada.
Canada.
Yeah, but
Okay.
Dutchie did start in Bend, Oregon. And now we're slowly expanding, hopefully one day all over the world. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
total. Let's talk about Dutchie because
Okay.
you've kind of taken over the industry and what you do and payment software, right?
Mm-hmm.
For legal dispensaries. So tell us about what you do and for Dutchie.
Yeah, so Dutchie is an all-in-one dispensary platform solution. So, like you said, Fern, we do cover cannabis payments. Cannabis
Right,
payments is a big part of the industry, especially for dispensary operators. And
right.
with that, we also have point of sale, inventory management, compliant reporting, e-commerce, and we recently started offering insurance. So my role,
Okay.
I've been focused primarily on New York, and
Yeah,
starting to expand more into other new markets. But New York has been my primary focus. And part of my role is working with various social impact group and foundations. New York, we've got a great relationship with folks like the Bronx Community Foundation, the Bronx Cannabis
right.
Hub, as well as supporting educational programs in New York. I don't know if you remember, but I think, gosh, when was it? Back in December, maybe there was an announcement saying that the governor was releasing $5 million, $5 million to invest towards cannabis specific educational programs in New York. So we've been supporting some of those colleges as well, such as Dutchess, University of Buffalo, Niagara
Right.
County, and supporting those programs through our compliance software.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I did hear about that. And I know that you have a big impact in New York. But when I think of you though, Ann, should I be thinking of you of your building relationships with your end customers, say dispensaries, and
Mm-hmm.
the owners of those dispensaries, or the environment, the ecosphere that surrounds the industry? How should we be thinking about what you impact?
Yeah, so mine is more on the partnership side. I mean, it's all like intermingling, right? Like
Yeah.
one informs the other. So
Yeah.
so with myself, it's like I go out and seek relationships, like in social impact groups,
Right.
associations, different foundations, education centers, as well as really like any type of partner channel
Mhm.
that would also be working just with dispensary operators and finding ways to partner together where we get introduced to dispensary operators, or we introduce them to dispensary operators as well. And then,
Right.
as you know, like in this industry, it's so hard to do everything yourself, right? So it really is like leaning heavy on partners and also doing our part to do what we can to ensure that
Hmm.
this like beautiful cannabis industry is a success, what it could
Yeah,
be.
that's great. That is great. So let's talk about how you got to cannabis, because in my introduction, right, we talked about some big brands that you've
Yeah.
influenced, right? So you have this experience with understanding branding and big brands and how they operate, and I'm
Mhm.
sure that's helping you. When did you make the decision? How did you make the decision that cannabis was the next thing for you?
Well, that's a good question. So you're absolutely right. I did start
Hmm.
off in the like customer experience, like UX agency background. I used
Yeah,
to work in advertising, which led me to work with big brands like EA, Starbucks, and Nike. And
right.
then from there, I ended up working at a retail software company. And then that retail software company eventually started this cannabis arm. And
Okay.
I was one of the, I was one of the core team members to start that. And then from there, like Dutchie happened to be a partner. And that's
Hmm.
how I found out about Dutchie. And then here we are today. And the thing is with Dutchie's really like at Dutchie, our North Star is being dispensary first. And for
Okay.
myself, like personally, I personally think that dispensary operators, they have the most difficult job in the supply chain in the industry.
Hmm.
So both from a value standpoint, Dutchie and I are very aligned. And I am grateful to be at Dutchie, to be at a company that has the same ethos that I do on a personal
Uh,
level.
that's great. I want to go there.
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought that up, because let's remove cannabis,
Mhm.
Dutchie, from the conversation and just talk about you from the perspective of your personal scorecard, right?
Okay. Yeah.
What's important to you as a human being functioning in this world?
Well, let's go way back, Fern.
Uh-oh. Okay. All
Let's
right.
go way
Don't
back.
scare me. Don't scare me. All right.
Uh, so the thing that really like motivates me to wake up every morning and be in this industry is it's really like so for myself. So I live in Brooklyn part-time now.
Hmm.
I also like I'm Canadian. I'm a Canadian citizen, and but I wasn't born in Canada. I was actually born in a little tiny town called Syria, Brunei, which is primarily like a Muslim country.
Okay.
And when I was born, my parents made the decision to move to Canada. And one of the big reasons is to give me an opportunity, a chance at equal opportunity,
Hmm.
which is something that Canada can afford, and maybe not all countries offer those same equal opportunities for women, for
Hmm.
people who are Asian. I'm Chinese, uh, and
Hmm.
and I've always that's always really stuck to me that my parents did sacrifice a lot to start over and come back and move to a new country to give me a better life and equal opportunity. So bringing that back to myself and the cannabis industry, when I look at the cannabis industry and when I look at cannabis retailers, even like living in Canada where cannabis has been federally legal for over four
Right.
years now, there still is a lot of, there's a lack of equal opportunity for cannabis retailers, despite the fact that, that the cannabis industry is a licensed legal industry federally.
Hmm.
There's still issues like you cannot get a bank account in Canada. There's a lot of trouble still insuring folks, cannabis businesses, and for dispensary operators in all over. It's like the rent, like you see it, especially here in New York, it's like the rent is often like 10 times more than if you were to open up another, like a regular retail business. So
Ah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So in my sense, it's like when I look back when I look back in my life, and if there's either like a white paper or there's something that comes out where, cannabis retailers, they're not only treated like all other retail, just like regular retail, not cannabis retail, it's just retail.
Right.
But not only like an even playing field, but we look at cannabis retailers as a best practice, or like what was their playbook, because just like some of the most hardworking, passionate, smartest folks that I know are all, in the cannabis industry, and many of them are cannabis retailers.
Retailers. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I take from that is that you look at the choices your parents made, and they
Mm-hmm.
and in your mind, Canada was a strategic choice
Mm-hmm.
because of the human rights concern.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gave you this opportunity. And what I'm hearing is that what you do for Dutchie, and maybe
Yeah.
what you did for other companies before Dutchie,
Mm-hmm.
aligns with all of that, meaning you equal opportunities for people of color, for
Correct.
women, for
Correct.
all folks in
Yeah. Just
industries.
for all cannabis, like for
Mhm.
anyone in the cannabis industry, right? And, like, yes, absolutely, like people of color, women, but just like anyone in the cannabis industry, when you look at, and I think that for us, like we live, breathe, and eat the cannabis industry. So we might
Yeah.
or we might be in our own little happy bubble, but like there's a whole world like outside of that. And when they look at the cannabis industry, there is still a stigma, there is still a level of like accepted discrimination, like not to sound dramatic, but there is like, when if someone was like, oh, I can't, if you had a store and you sold t-shirts and you're like, oh my gosh, like my landlord, he's just like charging me like 10 times more rent than the other like store across the street, like we would all be up in arms. Or it's like, oh, I can't get insurance, like we would be
Right.
horrified and be like, let's like put that on the news and blah blah blah. But then all of a sudden, if it's a dispensary, like a licensed legal cannabis retailer that pays tax just like everyone else, is doing everything above board, and they're like, oh, my landlord is like making me pay 10 times the rent. Sometimes you get the reaction, it's like, oh, because you're in the cannabis industry, like you're
Right.
you're selling drugs, like it.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like socially acceptable to be like, oh, okay, I guess that's okay. And then there's also things like 280E, that
Yeah.
there's this there's banking, like there's
Mhm.
something that Dutchie, like we feel really passionate about, is having the Safe Banking Act pass. So
Right.
there's basic human right things in the cannabis industry too, that you see the rest of the world openly discriminate. And I think, and all of a sudden that's okay, like it's not okay. There's
No,
really
no.
good people in the cannabis industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. I'm Vern Davis. I am your host of Plant Profits, and Plant Profits is proudly brought to you by Produce Global. My guest today is Ann Forkutza, and Ann is the head of strategic partners and industry relations at Dutchie. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Vern Davis. I am your host of Plant Profits, and welcome to Plant Profits. Plant Profits is brought to you by Produce Global. My guest today is Ann Forkutza. Ann is the head of strategic partners and industry relations at Dutchie. So, Ann, this has been great. The first segment, we really talked about the work that is being done and why, and your why, which was a very, very kind of you to allow us to get into that. Let's talk about the competitive landscape of what Dutchie does in the industry, right? And how do you guys compete, and why Dutchie? So talk to me about that a little bit.
Sure. Why Dutchie? That's a loaded question. Why
Mhm.
not? Why not? It is really interesting to see
Mhm.
the evolution not only of Dutchie, but the cannabis tech industry, and
Sure.
overall the cannabis industry. So when I first got in the cannabis tech space, that was,
Mhm.
gosh, like almost six or 7 years ago, where
That's about 40 years. Yeah.
exactly in cannabis years, right? And at the time, it's like I was working for like a cannabis point of sale company at the time, and Dutchie
Hmm.
was just not just, but like Dutchie was an e-commerce, a cannabis specific e-commerce company at the time. And then, just over the years, like Dutchie's evolution and what our offering has really evolved into more of an all-in-one cannabis tech platform for dispensary
Hmm.
operators. So point of
Hmm.
sale plus e-commerce plus payments, and then now we offer insurance. And what's that saying? It's like imitation is the best form of
From
flattery.
pottery. Yeah.
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 So I mean, we were the first cannabis tech company that I'm aware of to
Hmm.
evolve into that. And so you see other folks in the cannabis tech space, like they're evolving into this all-in-one platform because it really does solve a real problem for dispensary operators where, in theory, integration should all play nicely, like products and software should all
Hmm.
play nicely with one another. In reality, sometimes there's technical complexities that prevent that from happening. And so in order for us to deliver on our brand promise, which is to ensure dispensary operators are successful, so we're successful, we really had to own that entire experience. So point of sale,
Hmm.
e-commerce, payments,
Hmm.
and then when again, like I said before, our North Star is dispensary first. And then a lot of our
Hmm.
dispensary clients, they were having trouble getting insurance. And
Hmm.
then now we're in a position where like we can use our network and we're large enough to offer insurance to ensure that our clients stay in business if anything were to happen, like that insurance could cover. And then when you fast forward, like, or when you like zoom out and just look at how the cannabis industry has evolved in general, like you are seeing this like really interesting mix of like what's happening in New York, like I feel like is what maybe happened in or what happened in California like 6 or 7 years ago. It's what
Hmm.
happened in Canada maybe 4 years ago. And history has a funny way of repeating itself, but hopefully learning too. I will say though, in New York, in terms of the way New York has taken uh, the topic of social equity and how they've
Hmm.
been issuing social equity licensing and licensees, like it is something that we've never seen before in
Right.
any other state or anywhere really.
Hmm.
Instead of social equity being an afterthought or like an add-on, it is actually like the core focus of New York, and it's
Hmm.
been really beautiful to learn from and see, and to the point where other states are now revisiting their social equity program. And net new markets like Maryland and Minnesota are looking to New York to learn and see how they can incorporate social equity into their cannabis programs.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. What New York, and I want to talk about New York. Look,
Mhm.
look, the farther away, I live in Austin, right? The farther away
Right.
from New York that you are,
Mhm.
you see chaos, right?
Mhm.
That's the
Yeah.
inflection that you get. It's chaotic. It's
Mhm.
not it's not organized. I was there for Unpacked.
Yep. I'm jam
Uh,
packed.
yeah, I was there and walking around. I just saw so many illegal shops,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's just some unique problems when you're dealing with these illicit businesses and you're trying to
Right.
move in and honor your commitment to the legal businesses.
Right.
Uh, what would just kind of give us the state of the situation there now? And
Yeah.
you said other markets are looking at New York from a social equity perspective. What should they be
Mhm.
learning not to do?
Well, I mean, I think that you had a good point in the beginning where
Hmm.
the only way I feel that the legal
Hmm.
market will thrive is if something is done with the illicit problem. And I
That's
do
right.
want to point out there's a big difference between illicit and legacy. And illicit is
Yes,
kind of even
that's
like a
great.
spectrum. Like legacy is
Hmm.
a spectrum as well
Hmm.
too. Like on one end, on one side you have a very overused term, but legacy to legal. So on one end of the spectrum, you do have legacy folks that, in a sense, have really like pioneered this industry for us, and they've earned the right to benefit from the legalization of the cannabis industry. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have illicit, and those are folks that have no plan to ever cross over into the legal framework. And
Hmm.
those are the folks that are the problems. In New York specifically, there's been, like you said, like a ton of illicit bodegas that have
Yeah.
shown up with untested, unregulated products. You don't know how old the product is. With the
Mm-mm.
vape cartridges, you don't know where they're made. You don't know what's in them. So that is bad for the entire industry. And in addition to that, when you've probably heard in New York, it's been a much slower rollout than originally anticipated.
Right.
And real estate in New York in a regular industry is hard enough as it is. But with the cannabis industry, it's even harder. So you have these illicit bodegas that are essentially taking up a lot of real estate too.
Hmm.
So if we were to get rid of the illicit bodegas, we would also potentially, like hypothetically, have more real estate for the legal
Legal.
licensed dispensaries to
Right.
be in, right? So it's killing two birds with one stone. So yeah, I know that New York has put together a task force to combat
Yeah.
some of these illicit bodegas, and so those
Hmm.
efforts are starting. Empire, which is like one of the most one of the most famous, I guess, like illicit operators.
Hmm.
They recently got raided. So you're
Hmm.
starting to see that activity. And I'm hopeful that there's going to be more and more licensed legal dispensaries opening up in New York, especially near the end of the year.
Yeah. No, that's quite interesting. I'd look at it. I love your explanation of illicit and legacy. I look at legacy are the folks I want to bring with me.
Mhm.
Illicit are the folks that want to get out of the business.
Yeah, they're not in the industry at all. They are, they're ruining it for for everyone
Yeah,
else.
that's right.
And it's bad for everyone. And again, it's just like folks in the industry may know the difference, but just like people who are not in the industry, it's like I had a good friend who's smart
Hmm.
individual, and he ended up going to one of these illicit bodegas to be like, oh, look, I bought this, it's legal. I'm like, no, you went to an illicit bodega. And he's like, no, 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 there's like, look, there's like the packaging, and it's
Uh-huh.
got the warning signs, and it looks like legal tested licensed weed, but I looked at it and it's old weed from California, right? But I mean, I know that because I'm in the
Yeah,
industry, but
that's right.
like people not in the industry, they don't know that, and they're putting that stuff in their bodies. Like
No, you're
yeah.
absolutely right. And that's part of it. It's a very unhealthy way of
Hmm.
purchasing, consuming, and experiencing the plant.
Yeah.
Look, Ann, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to
Okay.
get right back at it. I'm Vern Davis, and you are listening to Plant Profits, and I'm your host. Plant Profits is brought to you by Produce Global. My guest today is Ann Forkutza. She's head of strategic partners and industry relations at Dutchie. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Vern Davis, your host of Plant Profits, and Plant Profits is proudly brought to you by Produce Global. My guest today is Ann Forkutza. Ann is heading up strategic partners and industry relations with Dutchie, and we're engaged in a conversation about New York. So let's talk about, from your perspective, New York is a big deal for you. There's a
Yeah.
lot of matter. There's a lot of energy that
Correct.
a lot of companies like you are putting to New York. Tell me why. Tell me why.
Well, I mean, like if you Google New York cannabis, like in the news and everything, it's like New York. I mean, everything's just a big deal in New York, but especially in the cannabis industry, you know, next to
Yeah.
California, and especially with some of the stuff that's happening in California right now. You know, like New York is primed to be like one of, if not the largest market in the country and possibly
Hmm.
all of North America and the world. So, you know, the entire industry, everywhere, all eyes are
Hmm.
on New York, and with Dutchie, it was no different, right? Like there was a New York State RFP that happened last year
Hmm.
that Dutchie was fortunate enough to win. The scope of that RFP meant that we would be the point of sale of record for the 100 to 150 social equity stores in New York State, and so that was a huge win
That's
for
awesome.
us.
That's a big deal.
Oh man, I did
What
not
did you do?
sleep. I
Hey,
didn't sleep.
you take credit for that? Did you take credit for that win? Did you
It
take
was
credit for that?
it
Come
was
on.
definitely a team effort,
Nice.
it was yeah, it was definitely my baby from, you know, from the day of submission to the day that we announced that we won. But definitely a team effort. I'm really grateful to have an incredible team, and that was a really big win for Dutchie. Still is.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. That's huge. But it goes back to our prior conversation. That can't happen until certain things, other things happen, right?
Mhm.
You guys
Yeah.
cannot realize the total impact of that win on your business and your mission of dispensaries first, right? You really
Yeah.
can't realize that until certain things are done, which brings me to the difficulty of trying to eradicate the illicit market and the just the perspective of the community that lives in New York and in Metro New York
Mhm.
about what's happening to people that look like them from
Mhm.
raids and those kinds of things,
Mhm.
and also at the same time trying to raise them up by putting legal entities inside their neighborhoods. I just think that's difficult to do all at one time.
Yes, it is definitely difficult. And you know, but at the same time, like we are all stronger together, right? Like a
Yeah,
rising tide lifts all boats. I really do need to commend the OCM, like the Office of Cannabis Management, which is
right.
the regulatory body in New York. They have taken steps to promote like the education of, okay, this is they've got, it's like a decal that it's this
Mm-hmm.
turquoisey color with the QR code.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is that decal present in the front of the store, that means it is a licensed legal dispensary. And so
Okay,
there's been a
that's
lot of
great.
efforts. Yeah, there's been
Yeah.
some effort to educate the community and the public on what the difference is between an illicit store and a licensed legal store. We do still have a ways to go. I know that like it's it's really interesting because all the licensed legal dispensaries, when it comes to certain marketing regulations and the type of signage you can use
Right.
and the rules around that, you have some really beautiful looking illicit stores that, and then on the other side with the licensed legal one, because they have to abide by certain regulations that are quite strict and stringent, you almost have them like, you know, with like window coverings and like very like muted signs, and it seems like almost like the cards are stacked against like the licensed legal market. But we'll get there. Just you know,
No,
crawl before we walk and run, I guess.
no, absolutely, absolutely. Look, I want to switch to something a little different. I want to talk to you about and get your feedback about Dutchie. What you work at Dutchie, you're part of
Mhm.
Dutchie, you're out
Yeah.
front with the brand, right? People
Yeah.
see you, that there goes Dutchie, right? And so, what about Dutchie, the culture that you're just proud of, that you makes you want to continue to be there and that attracts other folks to your business?
Oh, that's a good question, Vern. Well, as long as I can remember, I've always
Yeah.
had the desire to be part of something that's bigger than myself.
Yeah.
And I actually think every person who chooses to be in the cannabis industry has that desire, and we all have that in common, and it connects us. And so when I look at Dutchie, there is that connection as well. It's like, so I'm really grateful to have colleagues who came from, who not only came from the cannabis industry years and years ago, but in
Right.
addition to that, I'm grateful enough like my colleagues, some of them came from Apple and
Hmm.
Google, like
That's right.
PayPal, Toast, like Uber, like they've they've chosen to leave these really like big brand tech firms. They made the choice to come to Dutchie because they
Hmm.
also want to be part of the cannabis
This
industry, and
movement. Yeah.
yeah, and be part of something that is bigger than all of us. And I think that is something that's really unique about Dutchie. It's like we are a cannabis tech company, but we are more than that. And I think when folks end up working with us, whether or not they're our clients, they're our dispensary partners, or they're our strategic partners, I think that just like that energy is really
Hmm.
genuine, no matter who you meet at Dutchie, and that rings true, and it does connect us. And with when you, like some of our clients, when they say, oh, why did you pick Dutchie, like why didn't you pick like so and so and like this
Right.
other software company, right?
Right.
And I think that we offer more than just software. Like it's just, when you look at software at the end of the day.
Right.
I'm of course
Sure.
biased. I do think we have like the greatest software, but it's not about like a certain button being nicer looking or a certain report that maybe like we have and so doesn't have. It's like we genuinely believe in using whatever forces we can in our platform for good. We,
Hmm.
in addition to New York, we're part of, national efforts like, lobbying for safe. Dutchie is co-chair of a coalition to lobby to get rid of 280E. So, people in the in the cannabis industry can have a chance at being like, again, like a viable business. And
Business. Yeah.
yeah, and
Have
my
proper
call
deductions and
exactly.
depreciations and yeah.
Exactly. Be treated like a regular business, like we were talking about earlier. And then my
Hmm.
colleague, Brian Barish, like he's our VP of Government Relations and Legal, like, so he's co-chairing those efforts too. So it's not, again, that has nothing to do with selling software. And sometimes folks are like, why does Dutchie care so much? Like, why are we doing this? Like another example is that I'm in New York, and we've been doing this tour, this like New York State dispensary showroom tour, where we're literally like taking a mock dispensary and tearing it down and building it up and going through all over New York State, and educating folks about what it takes to run a dispensary from front of
Oh, that's
house
great.
to back of
Yeah.
house. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the reason for that, it was, it started off in a conversation with Desmond from the Bronx Cannabis Foundation, where they through the Bronx Cannabis Hub represent about 40 applicants, and
Hmm.
most of those folks who were applying for a dispensary license, they had never been inside a licensed legal dispensary before. And just like through that conversation, this, showroom idea manifested. Like we had our very first stop in the Bronx, and then the reception was so positive that there was this big desire to do that all over New York State and provide the opportunity for folks to have access to that level of education, even though they didn't live in the city. So we've gone through like all through Western New York, upstate. We just finished one in Long Island, and a lot of like in New York, there's been feedback where a lot of the access to education and to programs, they're all in Manhattan, they're all in
Right.
Brooklyn, but like New York State is a lot bigger than that. So going
Yeah.
back to like, okay, why Dutchie? And that is an example where we get asked, it's like, why does Dutchie care? Why is Dutchie even doing this dispensary tour all over New York State? Like, and And it's like, if we don't care, it's like ancillary companies like Dutchie, like the picks and shovels, right?
Right.
Of
Absolutely.
the operation, if card licensees or dispensary operators, if they don't have the tools and the education to be successful business operators, then having a point of sale or having software to run at dispensaries, like that doesn't even matter. So it's really at Dutchie, it's like we're larger than just the software component aspect. We have, you know, a network. I always say that, like, if I don't know someone, chances are like someone at Dutchie or like will know someone who knows someone. So
Right.
it's really just that network effect, and I think that is something that's really special and unique at Dutchie that no one else has.
Well, that's beautiful. And it sounds like Dutchie is an amazing place to not, it's more than the software company. It's making a
Yes.
difference in the culture of the business, and it's impacting the entire ecosphere of the cannabis arena. And I think that's great. And I want to thank you, Ann, for being on Plant Profits and showing up today and bringing it and really bringing us inside of the industry, some of the struggles in the business, and the real big opportunities as you guys see it. And I love how you explained how and why you guys are expanding your offerings to dispensaries. And it's always different. And I'll say this, it's always different when talking to a company that knows their North Star. And then they tell you what the North Star is. And
Yeah.
then when they talk about it, it all comes back. Everything you
Right.
said today came back to dispensary.
Oh,
And I think that's a beautiful thing.
thank
And
you.
and those folks at Dutchie are very, very lucky. So I want to thank all of you for joining us here on Plant Profits. And you can download episodes of Plant Profits by going to cannabisradio.com. Who's our partner in this whole venture, or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, we're everywhere. Anywhere you get a podcast,
You are everywhere.
we are there. Absolutely, and we're everywhere. And then you can also follow my company, Produce Global, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on all major platforms of social media. We are there, and really understand what we do and how we build companies. And we've built companies, billions and billions of dollars that have added on because of what we do to our clients. And we've changed people's lives. And that's protusglobal.com. That's PROTIS global.com. Until next time, I'm Vern Davis, your host of Plant Profits. Cheers.